a couple of years, you're probably going to technically be able to create a Hollywood film from your bedroom with nothing else than your imagination. It's rarely like the most obvious group of people to adopt it, who adopt it first. The real competition is going to be 14-year-olds who used to be able to only create like vlog content or prank content on YouTube, but they're now going to be able to produce very high quality filmic type of content. When you make any kind of content, you're competing for someone's attention, and the best content will win.
So the opportunity with Synthesia is to make a digital twin of yourself that can go and do some communicating, right? Which sounds amazing. But the fear is that the digital twins are they going to replace us? Who's creating them? So how do you make a really awesome digital twin of yourself? How do you use it to communicate with people, get your message out? And like, how do we even think about this?
Yeah, so I think the avatars, as we call them, was a lot of people still think of it as being like the avatar company. That's the technology. We're the first in the world to invent it back in 2020. I think when you look at the product today, it's much more than that, and it's a headline feature for sure. But really, what we are today is a video platform. When you make videos, lots of videos will have humans in them, right? Like you and I, we're talking. That gives a kind of another depth of engagement. But video is also having screen recordings and text on the screen and images and icons, and diagrams and animations, all that sort of stuff. And that's really, all of that is sort of packaged into our platform. We even help you with collaboration, translation of the content. We give you a video player made for AI that you can put on your website and your app. So I think when I think about what we're building, really, it's a video platform, right? Which is kind of natively built around AI. In terms of how you use the product, I think one thing we've always seen at Synthesia is that one of the driving mechanisms of our TAM, our total addressable market, has always been the quality of the voices and the avatars, right? Mm-hmm. So in 2020, when we launched the first version of the avatars, they were pretty bad, to be honest, right? They sounded like a GPS talking, and they looked like a computer game from like 2010 maybe, or something like that. And so we launched this product into the wild. We're kind of like, well, it's definitely cool. There's like, no doubt it's cool, right? Had a lot of the components we thought were going to be useful. It's very accessible, easy to use. You just type in a script, you get a video out. But we were kind of like very curious to see who would have an actual real use for this. At that point in time, it was clearly not good enough to make TV ads. That was for sure, right? But also probably wasn't really good enough to like product marketing. You probably wouldn't put it on kind of like your first website, right? But with the power of the internet and by virtue of kind of making it a very accessible tool, what happened was we had so many people who would come to us and they would start making all these videos. And then we would look at all those people and we'd figure out, okay, who's making these videos because it's jaw-dropping, it's fun, it's magical, it's viral, you want to show your friends, your family, and your mom. That's great for us. That helps drive the viral loop, right? But this is not a real use case. This is just people playing around, which happens a lot with AI tools today. And who are the users that are actually keep coming back and using the product, right? Because of course those are the most interesting to us, because those are the people we could build, a kind of lasting business around. Yeah. And it turned out very quickly when we talked to these people that when thinking about what use case this was good enough for, right? People are not comparing the avatar videos with real videos, because all the people who kept coming back to us did not make video before they used Synthesia. They would write long documents with like training manuals. They would make PowerPoints or something like that. And they all told us, look, I have some message I want to land with someone. And I know that sharing a 40-page PDF document is a terrible way of doing it. Even if people actually read it, nobody remembers anything, right? And one of the examples that kind of always stood out to me was a very, very big fast food company who had to onboard millions of people to work in their restaurants. Which is like, we send people all these materials, no one consumes them, and even if they do, they don't remember anything. And we tried using these avatar videos, and yeah, they're not great. But they are a lot better when we test people after on how much of the information they actually comprehended and understand. And they're also telling us they prefer to watch the video rather than read the 40-page document, even if it's not perfect, right? And that was one of the first few eureka moments for us, where we really started to like map out, okay, where is this valuable and where is it not valuable, right? And then what happened over time was that the avatar quality got better and better and better. So instead of just training fast food employees on like how to stay safe at work, we started people using it like university teachers, for example. We started seeing people using like customer support videos and product marketing videos. And if you look at where we are today, right, more than half of the content we create with Synthesia today is external facing, which means it's content that people will show to their partners, their customers, or whatever stakeholders. So every time the quality of the avatars go up, the TAM expands. that was a very long-winded way of answering how you use this technology to be the most effective. But I think the key thing we see, right, is that you have to be very honest with yourself when you use Synthesia of like, what is the technology mature enough for, and what are you comparing it against, right? Is it actually better to watch this avatar video than the alternative? I think that's one of the reasons we've been successful, because I think we've been very good at focusing in on the use cases where the avatar videos are actually driving utility, not just novelty, right? And maybe the simplest way of thinking about it in today is, so this is great for educational content, how-to content, practical content, teaching your users how to use whatever app you've built to get the most value out of it, onboarding a salesperson to make sure that they can sell the product in the best way possible, teaching your partners how to do the integrations with your software stack. All this like how-to utilitarian content, it works phenomenally well for, where visual communication is much better than text communication. What it doesn't work so well for is storytelling, right? If you come to me and say, hey, I'm gonna make like meta ads and try and drive like, paid marketing using avatars, it's very close to being there, but it's not really there yet. It's also not good enough yet for you to create like a mini fictional series that you're going to post on YouTube with avatars that fall in love with each other and tell jokes, right? The technology isn't really there yet. It will come, all these things, as the quality of the avatars gets better and better. But where we are right now, and the path we've taken as a company, is very much around this like educational, utilitarian, like very kind of practical content.
Mm. Yeah, really interesting. And just to tell you too, so two things come up. You call them avatars. 20 years ago, I'm the one that started using the word avatar to describe an ideal client profile. And I used to teach entrepreneurship and so forth. And one of the things that I would talk about is how you need to create an avatar of all the qualities of your ideal client, but then you also kind of need to create an avatar of yourself in your mind. And it's very interesting how you've like actually done this in a way where you're actually creating an avatar of you, and you're having to go meta to your own content or training or your own kind of knowledge. So that's kind of one piece. Another one that was just coming up as you were talking here is, yeah, I've watched your kind of quality get better and better. I've been showing your platform to people for a few years now, and it's been reliably one of the AI platforms that if I show it to someone and I say, look at this, for 2 or 3 years, when they see it, they just go, oh my God, this is real. It's like, it's one of those things that like shows them that the future is actually here. It's happening. You can sign up, you can actually use it. And so that's, I don't know, there's just something about the futurism, element that's there. And so so you're saying that it's best for educational content, explainer videos, teaching your partners how to do integrations. It's basically, if you're trying to explain something to another person, walk them through it, that having the avatar, the digital twin do it is much better than having it in boring blocks of text that they're just not going to remember. This is actually what goes in and like gets into the, the neurological connections or something like that, which is great. Makes a ton of sense. You're also saying that it's going to be good enough to do some of these other things soon. So I'd love to know more about that, maybe, at some point as we're talking here. But maybe just practically, if someone wants to make an avatar or a digital twin of themselves, and maybe one that's an explainer, but also something that is like an extension. So it's got their voice and their presence. Yeah. What's the process? And then what are some tips for making it feel authentic and not having that kind of ick factor?
Yeah. But it's very easy today. You can go in, you can, sign up to the platform and get started immediately. It takes 5 minutes of footage to create your avatar, and that includes both your video and your voice recording. You can use the webcam in your computer, and that's of course the easiest thing, or you can upload footage. That footage can be anything. If you shoot something with your iPhone, for example, or your smartphone, right, that might be higher quality. You can go to a studio with a professional green screen if you want the highest quality footage. And essentially your avatar is going to be, we're going to replicate the footage you give us, right? So if you set it with your webcam and you create your avatar, we're going to be able to produce new videos of you sitting in front of your webcam with the same kind of visual quality, the same light in the room, the same hairstyle that you had before, and so on. And same thing goes for kind of like the studio. And so essentially the footage you gives us defines what your avatar is going to look like one-to-one, more or less, right? Once you've created it, it takes, I think we're down to 4 or 5 hours now until your avatar is ready. And then you simply go in and you start creating content. You can speak 40 languages immediately in your own voice, which is pretty cool the first time that you see it. You can also opt in to create a longer voice clone of yourself. So 5 minutes is good enough to give you a good result, especially if you're an American speaker with an American accent. And sometimes you want to invest in doing a bit of a longer voice cloning session, generally like 15 to 20 minutes, which just gives you like a little step up in the quality. And especially like me, if you have a Danish accent, then it captures that a little bit better. But by now
Mm.
it's a very easy, very standardized process, which is, miles away from like 5 years ago when all this tech was just so immature, right? And by now, I'm sure you're following the text to speech page pretty well, right? Even with 10-second voice clips, you can get like pretty far with these technologies. So it's constantly evolving, and we have what we call a selfie avatar product, which where you make your avatar once and you can prompt yourself into new places. So if you want to be in an office, you want to be in a jungle, you want to be sitting in a plane or something like that, you got to get the kind of creative flexibility to essentially just prompt your avatar into new places. And that's a big headline for some of the products we're going to be releasing later in the year. We want you to be able to just shoot your avatar once, and once you've done that, we take care of the rest and we can put you anywhere that you want to be, right? So my best tip for like creating a great avatar is really just for where the product is right now is shoot a nice looking video, like your video right now, for example, right? And you're using like a nice camera, you have a good background, you're like well lit. That means your avatar is also going to have all of those characteristics. If I go into the closet here and I film myself on my webcam, then it's going to look like I'm sitting in a closet, right? Which, I mean, for some use cases, that's actually what you want. But just adjust your recording sessions, whatever use case you have for your avatar after the fact.
Yeah. Are any of your avatars interactive or going there?
Yeah, so we just launched interactivity inside of the tool, which means you can create videos that can brand to different scenarios and a whole bunch of like other things. We're launching our video agents also later this year, which essentially is going to take you from being able to create. The way I think about this is like right now we're kind of using new technologies to create old media formats, right? So the videos that people generally make with Synthesia or other AI video tools is videos like we've always known them. It's linear, it's broadcast, right? You take the video and 5 million people watch exactly the same video. But that is, of course, in many ways, an artifact of the old production process of having to film things with a camera. Once every video is generated with code, we can do so many more new things with them, right? So, for example, what you're going to do pretty soon is create a video where, let's say, you're creating a sales statement video for someone where you're teaching about your new pricing policy. It's a salesperson. You watch a 2-minute segment around the new pricing policy, and before you can go on in the video, you do a simulation with an avatar where you maybe take 10 turns and the agent or the avatar pretends to be a customer. You have to overcome certain objections, making sure that you basically understand and comprehend the content you just went through, making it a two-way thing, right? There may be other types of videos where maybe you want ability to ask a question. If it's a product marketing video, you can talk about some functionality in your platform, and then you can open it up for the customer to just ask if they have any questions around the functionalities. So that's definitely the way the space is going, right? I think it's a huge market in itself just to automate the production process, which I think where like most AI video is right now. It's essentially just getting rid of the camera, and instead of filming things in the real world, we can generate it. But the real big promise, I think, is that video turns into something different, right? And I think, as I've said a few times, it will diverge over time. It's just like the first websites. The first websites look like newspapers on a screen, right? Because that's what we could imagine, and then we figured out with a website we could do a lot of things you can do with a newspaper. We can update it in real time. We can connect people in a comments field. With one click, you can go to a gazillion different pages all over the internet, and all the other things that makes a website very obviously different from a newspaper, right? We're just still very early in kind of like that timeline.
So let's maybe you could give a couple of examples of how, I don't know, maybe someone who's more of a solo entrepreneur, maybe someone that's got a, kind of a small team or a growing business, and then maybe someone that's more, at the enterprise level. What are some ways that people are using this? What are some other kind of creative ways that we may not think of? Because it feels like this is one of those things that most people, when they look at it, they think, oh, I could do this one thing, and then they don't think of a whole bunch of other things that it probably could be used for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so one of the, for me at least, amazing things about building this company is really just the variety of use cases. Like you could literally use video for almost anything, right? On the kind of solopreneur scale, I think what we see a lot is people who run like kind of bootstrap businesses, but where there's in general, if you run like a SaaS app, right? customer success and activation is generally like a pretty important thing. But if you have to sit and record yourself doing an entire academy or explaining like how to use your product, how to get the most value out of it, that can get very tiring. You can also run into problems such as, again, going back to the accent piece, maybe if you don't want to have a Danish accent on all your videos, if North America is your biggest market. And here, essentially, we can go in, right? If we can help people, we have an AI screen recorder, which is a Chrome extension you install, and you essentially can record whatever's happening on your screen, and you can get a fully editable version of it after. We even help you put it into like different chapters and scenes and so on. So just creating content that helps your customers either be more successful with your product. We also see a lot of success in customer support, where as an entrepreneur, right, if you have your own like bootstrap SaaS, generally one of the things that you want to automate away the most is customer support because it just takes a lot of time, right? And I can give you a fun example. This is from a bigger company, but it holds true, I think, all the way down the stack. One of our big company customers had a problem with 70% of the people who called up their call center were people who didn't understand why their bill this month was higher than it was last month. Very basic question, right? And so, of course, they added tons of information about this everywhere on the website, right? Before you call, click here, read this page, and understand how your bill works. Yet people still call in. Then what they did instead was they added a video into that flow, and that decreased the amount of people who called in by something like 70 or 80%. Simply just by the virtue that people can click play on a video, watch a 1-minute segment explaining their bill. A lot of people have a very difficult time just sitting down, just like reading a page of text, right? And it may not hold true for you and me, and maybe for the listeners of your podcast, but if you take your average consumer, their attention span is extremely short. They may not be super literate, and they really just prefer to watch a video as opposed to reading a big page of text, right? And so that's something we see a lot of success with in both big and small businesses. If you go to the other way to the enterprise, here you generally have a lot of information exchange, and that's an important part of like running a business. You want to make sure, if I take Zoom as an example, Zoom has a sales force of 1,000 people all over the world. And obviously they're in hard competition against Microsoft Teams and other products that they compete against. Making sure that their sales force is always ramped is important, right? And of course, things change. You change the pricing policy, the competitive landscape changes, new products get released, etc. And they essentially used to have either in-person training or Zoom call training for all the salespeople. In-person is, of course, very, very expensive. And so that doesn't really scale. Gathering people on like long Zoom calls or sending out long emails is also not a great way of doing it, because if you send emails out, the same thing would happen. Like technically people have received the information, but then actually reading the entire page, it's just for a lot of people on a busy day is difficult. Now they make these like bite-sized videos, and I think they've made like 400 of them or something like that now. And they can churn these out in like 24 hours, right? The beautiful thing about the platform is that anyone can use it. If you know how to use a PowerPoint, you can make a Synthesia video immediately. And a whole variety of other use cases around like information exchanges is what we generally see.
You know what I feel like the takeaway here. So I come out of a background, I did a lot of writing, a lot of copywriting, marketing, and so forth. And the written word has like represented distance communication for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And then we got to radio, and then we got to TV. But I think those things, there's some kind of like programming that we have that they're one way and they're mass and they're kind of, you have to be big to do it and so forth. And I think what I'm realizing here is that the paradigm shift might have something to do with anything that you're using a block of text for, you should test using a video of you. Yeah. Like you should just be thinking that way now. Just simply because when someone comes up to a block of text, it's almost like a roadblock for a lot of people. It's almost like a mental block. Whereas if they come up to something that's moving and talking, they just go, oh, what's that? And it goes in a different way. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we also see a lot of success with, I gave one example, right? But like complex products, like understanding how to take out a mortgage, or how to get through a mortgage application. It's phenomenal to see how much it impacts activation rates and understanding rates for consumers if you just add a video in. And so I think the way you described before, of like it is a text block is a roadblock for a very, very large percentage of people, and testing it out with a video is extremely powerful, right? I would again say I think the avatar is an important part of this, but there's as many videos made with Synthesia, which is just a screen recording with a voiceover, right? Like the avatar is an important part of like making it human and making it engaging. But I really think the main thing here is like use the right tools to communicate whatever you're communicating. If you're communicating how to change your password, it's probably better to have a screen recording of someone changing their password as opposed to an avatar like explaining how to reset your password. Um,
Right.
so I think it's like what we see the best use of the power user is really good at like mixing in avatars with diagrams and screen recordings and images. It really is, and I think to your point, right? Like as someone who also has written a lot in my life and love reading, it is a new language you have to learn, right? Telling something in video is different than telling it in text. And we have an agent that can take a document for you or a web link and actually give you an outline. We write the script for you. We design some scenes for you. It's not perfect. It's pretty good. It's a starting point, but it is kind of a learning curve also to understand like how do you communicate with the most effectiveness, right? One of the things we saw, especially in the early days, was a lot of customers would go in, copy paste a Word document, and make an avatar video talking for 9 minutes. That's not a better experience. That's actually a worse experience, right, for most people. So it's also like learning that like language of video, which is super important to be successful.
Hmm. Yeah, it's you're just triggering a lot of thoughts here. So in other words, like our eyes are right next to the brain, and a lot of the brain is for visual. And we tend to think, well, if I'm reading, it's visual, right? But actually it's not. That's auditory that's been then turned into visual that we then have to turn back into, like we have to do like these translation layers or something. Whereas if you can just kind of go direct, I mean, I think about when I buy things on if I buy something on Amazon to, I don't know, put together for my daughter or something, my first thought is not read the directions anymore. It's go see if there's somebody that made a video of putting this thing together. Because I know that if I can just watch a human actually put it together, I'm going to do it like 3 times as fast as trying to figure out the, the printed thing. So that it's a really good point. It's a new language. We have to start thinking in how do I like communicate, demonstrate, and do it with an avatar or with visuals. And I mean, with a lot of the platforms now, you can make visuals that
Yeah,
will do a lot of this education too. It sounds like you're working on some of those.
exactly. I mean, the entire field is moving so quickly, right? And there's like, I think most people, when they think of AI video models, think of like the photorealistic camera footage being replaced by AI models, right? But there's also motion graphics is a very time intensive thing to do. I'm sure you you know that
Yeah.
already. But automating or generating motion graphics that matches your content, that's very important. We have a model that's training right now, which learns to do cuts. So most videos, especially if you want like user generated like TikTok, YouTube style content, people cut all the time, right? Every like 7, 8 seconds, you see a new cut. Like you zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, and this is both
Yep.
because people, of course, cut into footage, but it's also kind of like a stylistic choice. And so we've made a model now which can both do the kind of front-facing angle like this, but it can also do, talking like this, which is a classic trick you do in enterprise video, right? You change the angle. And this model can actually, just given a script, can actually put that together for you. It'll cut it. It'll be really fast. It'll use like different angles. And that's again a language, right? Of how you cut and edit something. And we can teach a model how to do that. Just like we can teach a model how to do motion graphics really well. We can teach a model how to replicate the footage of you and me and how we talk and how we act and how our body language works like. It's just still very, very early days, right? But we're not that many years out from a lot of these things being combined together. And I think actually we probably will be able to just say, here is my Word document, which was a written document, and you give that to our system. And our system is also connected to all the knowledge in the rest of your company. So you'll get the document and we'll figure out, okay, this is what you want to make a video about. Let me make it into video language. Let me pick an avatar that matches it. Let me, from all of your digital assets that I have access to in the knowledge layer, your Google Drive, your SharePoint, so let me pull out the right images, let me pull out the right videos. Maybe let me generate a new video of this particular product and actually put together something for you that's more or less like a finished product, right? Getting at the last 10% is going to be really difficult, but I think we're getting pretty close to a world in which it's not more effort to communicate in video than it is to communicate in text, right? And it's like that gap is what has been decreasing significantly. We took it from up here to down here, but there's still a lot of work to do in the whole kind of like editing part of making a video.
Yeah, what a fascinating so the idea of the two camera like cut and to basically have avatars from multiple angles built in, and then it knows how to like keep you visually engaging by cutting between these different scenes. I'm starting to realize, wow, that alone right there, that's a whole rabbit hole. That's a whole world to go into. Because what happens when like I'm on a Zoom conversation with you, and it actually turns out that it's more interesting to see me from different angles while we're talking real time, and the AI can do that. I don't, it's blowing my mind right here. I feel like we're getting into the matrix.
One of the things I find so fascinating about having building this product, right, is is this like tension between our primal brains and our logical brains, right? So logic would say that when you make a video, for example, like you make a video, you put like all the right things in place. And because we started with the PowerPoint user as kind of like our ICP, not with like people who use Premiere, the first iteration of the product is like pretty simple, right? But it turns out that if you like a very simple thing we discovered early on is like, let's say you want to take a PowerPoint and you want to make it into a video. You don't want to record yourself. You don't want to share the 1 hour Zoom call that you always go for this PowerPoint. You want to make like a 10-minute version of it, right? So you go in, you can upload a PowerPoint to Synthesia, and you can write the script. They can go through that PowerPoint. Now, what we discovered very early on, and what a lot of people were telling us when they came to the platform was they had actually been making these videos before, but because a PowerPoint is completely static, right? It's an image essentially. People's attention drifts 10 seconds in. If it's just like you
Mhm.
looking at a PowerPoint and a voice explaining what's going on, your brain is going to get bored really quickly. So you're going to switch tabs, you're going to do whatever. But then what we figured out was like if you add an avatar that's talking, right? Now something is happening. Your brain is actually kept entertained by looking at the avatar to like seeing what's going on. If you add like a ribbon in the side of the video with some small animations, just like, that has no like information embedded in them, it's just like something that moves. Now you're even more engaged, right? And that is what good video language is, right? It keeps your brain engaged. There's like something is happening, you're listening to it, you're seeing something. And of course, it makes like no logical sense, right? Like you could even argue the avatar in many cases, there's no you don't gain any extra information with the avatar, right? But it keeps your kind of primal brain entertained enough to kind of like watch the videos. And so when you took these PowerPoint, you made them into videos. It turned out that it's a hell of a lot better to have an avatar that's like reading out the PowerPoint as opposed to having just a voiceover, because otherwise people's attention kind of drifts really quickly. And there's so many of these like small things of how do we communicate that you learn with this sort of stuff, right? It's very fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So we're getting into a world where we're talking about agents, we're talking about digital twins, we're talking about having a um an AI that can kind of be you on your behalf. A lot of my friends are creating these so that their clients can come and get coached by them, but it's not really them. It's just another friend of mine just built a platform that's doing this kind of work, and so I can feel there's a lot of it's starting to like kind of crest or like dawn in people's consciousness that hmm, are these things going to get better than me? Are they going to replace me? It's like so. How do you think about what is it that makes us special as humans? How do we keep the part of us that keeps us sacred and special? And then what is good to kind of outsource to the AI? How do you kind of look at this philosophically?
I think you can go two paths there, right? You can do one, which is the sci-fi version of this, which is we're all gonna have avatars. We're gonna be talking to each other's avatars all the time. Our avatars are gonna be talking to each other, and that's kind of like the path that this is going. And then you can take I would say, more boring part of this, which is saying, well, this is really just like automating the production process of creating video content, right? It's not. It may not be like as sci-fi as it sounds.
Hmm.
The way we've always gone about this is that it's all about augmenting humans. I think as much as good as LLMs are and will become in the future, um, ultimately, when you make any kind of content, you're competing for someone's attention, and the best content will win, right? And the best, and maybe that will change over time, but I think right now you definitely still need the human to make good content. I think, yes, there's a lot of AI slop on the internet. There's also a lot of SEO spam before LLMs came. There's just like low quality, worthless content, right? You've been able to outsource the production of all this stuff for like a really long time. And I still think what's uniquely human is when you communicate something is like understanding how to do it empathetically, how to understand the current zeitgeist you're in, the culture we're in, and making
Hmm.
connections between things that maybe shouldn't be a connection, making something that feels funny because it's kind of like a little bit off. Like when you see the world's best content creators, interviewers, or whatever, right? Musicians, that's what they're really good at, and I don't think that's going to go away. I think what we probably will see is a rise in how much we interact with computers by talking to them, and I think that's there will definitely change the job market in some regards, but I'm not as bullish on AI just like overtaking every single white collar job on the planet in the next 5 years. Like I think that's usually set by
Mm.
people who have very little understanding of like how many of those white collar jobs actually work and why they work and what people actually do. Doing research, for example, is certainly an important part of being a consultant, but it is not like being a consultant. It's not just like Googling things, putting them in PowerPoint slides. It's like managing a client, managing expectations, managing humans and stakeholders, all these things. So I'm not one of those people who think that just like everything will just be taken over by AI. I think it'll massively augment how we communicate. And I think as a company, right, you'll probably have agents that can answer questions on your behalf. Maybe the first screening call for someone who wants a job at your company, where you'll just go through a 15-minute interview with an AI that can ask clarifying questions, try to figure out if you're fit for the job. It's better for the company because you can save some headcount. It's better for the person doing the interview because they'll know immediately after if they went on the process, if they didn't go on to the process. But I don't think this necessarily means there's going to be no junior HR recruiters, right? I think what they'll maybe mean is that a junior HR recruiter, gets to work every single morning, and instead of jumping on the exact same call 15 times, they review 50 calls that were done yesterday by the AI. They look at the transcripts, they look at the LinkedIn profile of the person, and instead of jumping on a call themselves, they have a good transcript, an idea of who this person is, and they make a decision whether that person should continue in the funnel or not. And I think the same thing will happen for sales, maybe for customer support, etc. So I think I'm a big believer in like jobs will change, and of course, like for example, being a camera operator may not be the best career in 10 years time, but I still think camera operators today are definitely like in the top 5% of people who know how to use these like AI video tools. Um, so yeah, I think it will definitely impact jobs. It'll impact how we communicate, right? But I think we're generally very in the tech bubble. I think we're good at overestimating the short-term impact of some of these technologies. Like if you think about how many people in the world that have still not made an AI video, I haven't even used GPT yet. It's it's pretty big, right? I mean, you work in the enterprise like I do. We basically target corporates and enterprise. Um, it's gonna be a long process before all of this stuff is kind of like fully rolled out in that manner.
What's the most creative or like the weirdest use of an avatar that actually worked, that someone did, or maybe a couple of examples?
Uh, that's a good question. I mean, we see a lot of like, well, actually, there's a fun one. So this is like years ago. I was traveling and I was in Los Angeles for work for like a bunch of meetings. And between meetings, I sit down at this like Mexican restaurant, and then I look at the menu card, which is a physical menu card, and I see a picture of one of our avatars in the middle of the menu card and a QR code we can scan. um, and I
Awesome.
scanned the QR code, and then it's one of our avatars basically taking you through the menu. So it's like talking about like showing pictures of the food and like this is our specialty and all sorts of stuff. I thought that was really cool. Whether that really moved the needle for their business or not, I mean, it's hard for me to say. I would probably doubt it, but we've seen so many interesting things like so another one with services business who used like a couple of years ago used avatars to interview people, not in a conversational manner like you would do it today, but simply just having like a series of videos asking you a question, and then you would have to respond, and then they would sit and like review the candidates after that. Um, we have what other fun use cases? We have one of our really big customers, which is deployed at scale, basically do kind of personality tests. So if you're an executive working in a company, a lot of people have taken these before. And what they've done is they've actually taken the results of that test that you do, they turn that into an interactive video with avatars that explains the different facets of your personality. Again, going a bit back to that thing of like you receive a 40-page PDF document with the results of your personality test. For a lot of people, that's not the best way to consume that content. So they give you this web link essentially where avatars will like talk you through different areas of your personality and so on. And this has been like a really, really successful product they've built. I think they're building it on like the fourth year now, something like that.
That's a great idea. We actually have a personality test, a kind of like an assessment that we do. That's an excellent idea. Um, all right, so let's maybe look out into the future. What have you had to like change any of your beliefs or paradigms while you're building the cutting edge, kind of stuff? And like, what do you think? I'm really interested in how in like transformations and in paradigm shifts and in how we have to like learn to think differently. So what have you learned that everybody else is going to have to figure out, they're going to have to learn, or the belief changes that you see coming?
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot throughout the years. So we started in in 16 was kind of like, the sort of first initial work around Synthesia. We raised the first funding round in 2017. Impossible round to raise. Everybody thought we were absolutely batshit crazy back then, but managed to get $1 million from Mark Cuban. Spent the first 3 years trying to build essentially an AI video product for video professionals, Hollywood studios, agencies, production companies. We focused on video translation or dubbing. So give me a real video and I'll translate it to a different language by replacing the voiceover, but also reanimating the facial expression so it looks like you're speaking Spanish, French, whatever. And I mean, it wasn't a total disaster. We did $1 million in revenue in like 2.5 years, something like that. But it was very, very clear that this was not the path to build a big company. This was the path to building like a visual effects studio with a proprietary technology, which was a vitamin, not a painkiller. We did some big projects with Mayhem, for example, a really cool advertisement with him. But I mean, we were like 3% of making that happen, right? Like we're totally not in control of our own destiny. And I think what I learned then was a lesson I think we've learned many, many times in the history of technology, which is that when you invent these new powerful technologies, it's rarely like the most obvious group of people to adopt it who adopts it first, right? And what we found was that actually what was more interesting than the video industry was all the people in the world who were not making video, counterintuitively, right? But wanted to make video. All the people working corporate jobs, small businesses, people didn't know how to use a camera. They couldn't get the budget from their boss, but they were desperate to make video. Because these people, right, their house is on fire. Like they're all like, I'm sharing these really important messages in text documents and nobody cares about them and nobody reads them. I need to make a video, but I can't use a camera because it's so unscalable, it's so expensive, it just doesn't work. So just give me anything that will spit out a video for me and I will pay you for it, right? And so the quality threshold for these people of what we had to develop initially was way lower than like a Hollywood studio where you have like some director who will be reviewing every single little pixel, right? So that was one of the big things. It's like, really switching to targeting PowerPoint users rather than video professionals. That was a very important, I think, shift for us. And then I think in the later years, again, there's been many different things. Maybe I'll pull out two that are highly related. I think that when you work in these like hypey fields, and I've been, doing this for 8 years, I've been through the ups and downs. Managing like the bullshit aspect and the hype of it is very interesting. You want to lean into the hype and the bullshit and the big dreams of all the stuff that's going to happen eventually and all the stuff this is going to mean for the world, right? Like in our world, it would be like real-time avatars talking to you, conversing and doing all sorts of stuff on your behalf. Like that's an important part of running your business because you have to paint the picture and the vision and it's something that draws people in. But it's also very important not to fall into like innovation potholes, which is like trying to push the technology to do something it's not ready for yet. We have so many competitors who've died there, right? They tried to do personalized sales videos 4 years ago. And we were sitting in a room and we were like looking at each other. Our VCs were telling us like, you should do personalized sales videos, right? It's an obvious use case. It's easy to measure the ROI. Let's go. And we were all sitting in a room and we made these personalized sales videos. We looked at the videos and we're like, does any of us actually think that we received a video like this, that we would convert better? Or would we just think it's weird? And we're all like, we think the avatars are just not good enough, That it's a cool idea and it'll work one day, but it's not now. And so we decided not to do that. A competitor died because they went down that route and they closed lots of revenue initially because people were excited about the idea. But when it came to the actual implementation results, it's just clear that technology wasn't there, right? I would say real-time avatars is kind of in that phase right now where I don't think anyone who uses a real-time avatar product today actually thinks that it's a better experience than whatever the alternative is. It's definitely cool, right? But is it a better experience? Like if you're trying to understand asking a customer support bot a question, most people would prefer either like a text box or a voice agent to talk to rather than a video that has 10 times the latency and for whoever's deploying that agent that has 10 times the cost of a voice agent, right? So I think it's just like two random examples, but I think we've been trying to pull into so many different directions. Like people wanted to do VR avatars in 3D and they wanted to pay us a lot of money for it. So I think you really have to be good at handling like the bullshit aspect of all this stuff and figuring out like what's the technology actually ready for and what will it be ready for eventually. But you have to kind of manage that sequencing very, very carefully, right? I think that's one of the core reasons we've been successful today. And that all for us comes back into this mantra, which is utility over novelty, which is we build things that drive actual utility for our customers, not just cool demos, which sounds very obvious, but I think a lot of AI companies are struggling with this because it's so addictive, that sugar high of creating like a viral moment that gets people to your app and everyone is talking about it, everyone's sharing the videos. And that's all great, but if it doesn't translate into renewal of the contract 12 months later, you have a really big problem on your hands, right? So I think managing that, like managing the hype kind of component of AI and AI video for us has been one where we continue to kind of shift around what we think as the technology gets better and better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you've been doing this since 2017. So you've been through all the struggles. You've probably, I assume, worked with a lot of other AI companies, or at least networked with them and so forth. You, I get the feeling that you have a sense of where this is all going, and I'm listening to the way you're talking here. So what does happen over the next 3 to 5 years, do you think, as generative AI, again, like crashes into everything? And how should business owners, entrepreneurs, people start preparing themselves?
So I think there's two main things in AI video if we start there, right? I think there's two things that's going to happen. First one is that the quality of what you can create is going to go up very, very dramatically. So in a couple of years, you're probably going to technically be able to create a Hollywood film from your bedroom with nothing else than your imagination, right? I don't think we're going to be the platform you're going to do that on, but there's a bunch of other companies who are going down that path of creating super high quality Hollywood style film content. That's very exciting. And I think that's in many ways gonna equalize the marketing landscape for small businesses. Because with very little budget, assuming you have good ideas, right, you can also create a Super Bowl ad that looks really slick and really cool. You can also create 400 different creatives to run paid ads against, right? Which historically is something that's been reserved for like real big companies with really, really big budgets. So I think that's very exciting if you're like a small business. They can make that creativity come to life. The other thing that will happen in this aspect is that a bit of what I spoke about before, right? But I think a lot of people are still like thinking about Hollywood films and like what's Hollywood going to do with AI? Like there's all this buzz around, what are they thinking in Hollywood? Unions, actors, etc. And I think what's going to happen in Hollywood is very little the next 3 or 4, 5 years because these people are entrenched in the ways that they work. They have a business model that is, at least to this day, still stands. The real competition is not going to be Hollywood studios picking up this technology and running with it. The real competition is going to be 14-year-olds who used to be able to only create like vlog content or prank content on YouTube, but they're now going to be able to produce very high quality, filmic type of content. And a lot of that content is going to be really bad. But there's going to be some geniuses out there, and they're going to start to create really interesting content that's not going to follow any of the rules we see in Hollywood. It's not going to be 1.5 hour long films. It's not going to be TV series that have 16 episodes too much because someone is just trying to milk the storyline of it, right? That's going to be a whole new genre of content that's going to emerge. And I'm very excited to see what's going to happen there. This is exactly what happened in the music industry, right? Once we invented an entirely digital way of creating music, as in you can sample things, you can use synthesizers to create sounds. We got a camping explosion of new genres, producers from all over the world. It's not about knowing the right people in Hollywood or being rich. Like it's just about like whoever has the best idea wins. And I think that's something that I'm personally very, very excited about to see what is the grassroots movement of AI video going to look like? Because it's going to be really, really cool, I think. And I think that's going to be the thing that I would worry about if it was Hollywood and Netflix. It's not so much the internal fights. It's the fact that ultimately they're competing for attention with TikTok and Meta and YouTube today. And I think today most of us separate those two things out. Like once you've had dinner, you sit down on your sofa and you watch something on Netflix. I'd watch like some high quality content. And when you're on your way to work, you probably scroll on TikTok. But I think those lines are going to be very blurred. So I think that's going to happen in advertisement entertainment. Then I think the other part of this world is the one that I operate more in, which is the enterprise knowledge, education, practical content, information exchange in many different ways, right? Where we are right now is that these technologies have made it much easier for people to learn things, to absorb information, because you can do that visually. As I mentioned earlier, what's going to happen is it's going to become two-way very quickly. So it's not just going to be you watching a video about something and hoping you learn. It's going to be you watching a video, you're going through a simulation, you're being able to ask questions. It's going to be much more personalized and interactive than consuming just a normal static video. There's going to be AI models and LLMs that are going to be able to draw on something it knows about you and how you performed in like other training aspects of what knowledge you already have consumed. Maybe it knows something about what your interests are. So if it's teaching me about something, it'll probably use a lot of like music analogies because music is my biggest passion. And if it's for you, maybe it's sports. I don't know whatever you're interested in your personal life. And that's going to have a huge impact on how we learn and exchange information and how we buy things, right? So this is almost going to be more like a new interface to do different things. And then there's going to be the whole like entertainment side of it on the other hand. I think those are like the compressed way maybe of what I think is going to happen like within the next like 5 to 10 years.
Do you think that AI at some point wakes up, becomes sentient, conscious? I love asking this question. And if so, then what happens?
Yes, I think so, but I think I mean, obviously it's a very philosophical question of like, what does that mean, right? Does it
Yeah.
mean that something passes the Turing test? Does it mean that it starts to just like do things we didn't ask it? Or does it mean that it has a soul, right? That is like, that kind of is in the word like sentient. What I find interesting is that this idea of the Turing test, for example, I think is kind of like a dead end because we keep redefining the Turing test, right? If you took
Yeah.
GPT, whatever for, not back 30 years in time, I don't think people would almost think it's like black magic, right? This is like clearly an intelligent,
Yes.
sentient being. Now we're like, oh, I'm so tired of ChatGPT. It uses way too much filter, right? Like you can answer like any question you can think about in like 5 seconds, and we still find all the flaws that exist with it. I think these systems are going to get more intelligent. I think on a long enough timeline, and this is very sci-fi, but I think ultimately, I don't think necessarily what our kind of flesh is the final form, right? At one point, we were like bacteria in the sea. We'll probably begin to merge with computers in some very slow way, like you get a microchip implanted in your brain, like that's kind of like that's already happening. Then it takes a step further, and probably at some point it just becomes machines, just kind of like becomes one of us. I also think we'll definitely begin to see lots of autonomous systems that operate on high level instructions as opposed to us redefining like all the rules inside those systems. I mean, that kind of already happens today to some extent, right? Like it's not because every system out there in the world is like 100% predictable in terms of what it's going to do. And I don't know, is it something going to wake up and be like, I don't know. I think that's the way I think about all this stuff is like I think that will happen, but not in the way we think it will happen. There won't be a day where all of a sudden all of our computers wake up and start being real people. It's like step by step by step by step by step by step, right? It's just like converting ourselves from the physical world we walk around in every day to our digital personalities, right? When we look back in like 500 years, we go, oh wow, we progressed from the physical world around us being physical beings to being digital beings, right? But that didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, right? The first thing was we had forums online. We made a username. Then we got a Facebook account. Then we got an Instagram account. We started uploading pictures of ourselves. We started tweeting and we started building this digital personality. And at some point, it probably jumps into we're all in VR and it's our personalities that's running around in VR land somewhere. And they look like us and feel like us. They have conversations when we're even not connected to them. So I think all this stuff just like happens very gradually. There's a French philosopher called Baudrillard, I'm probably butchering his name, but he wrote a book called Simulation and Simulacra, which is one of my favorite philosophy books. And I won't get into all the details of it, but there's something that's interesting about it. The Matrix was built on his thoughts, right? The Wachowski's sisters, I think they are, right? They read his philosophy and thought it was such an interesting idea. They wanted to make a film about it. So they made The Matrix, which of course has the real world and the virtual world, right? And Baudrillard hated The Matrix because he felt like they completely misunderstood one of his central points, which was that it is not binary, right? It is a scale of virtual world and real world. It's not like either you're in the virtual or you're in the real world. It's kind of what's happening right now where with our social media, I think is a good example of this, right? Where in some ways you could argue that like a big influencer, like her virtual personality is more her than her real personality because more people know the virtual version of her and think that that's the real version of her. And so I think I think that's how all this stuff's going to play out, right? It's just going to be bit by bit by bit. And when we look back, all of a sudden we look back like 40 years ago and like, wow, isn't it crazy back then the computers didn't talk to us and have a personality? Now they do.
Victor, Amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. We'll put some links down to your work below. Thanks for the time today.